Okay, so welcome back to the NextGen podcast. So glad you guys are joining me on this deal. This is really fun. We're at a conference right now, and we've been talking about and thinking about a lot of things we haven't even fully processed yet. But why don't you guys introduce yourselves for the podcast? Who are we talking to right now?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
My name's JG. I get to oversee and direct young adult ministry at Mission Hills, which is we define as 18 to 25-ish.
Awesome.
I like how you throw the ish in there.
Yeah, I know how I said define, and then I said ish. I like it. Don't think about it.
It works.
Don't look it up.
It works for you.
We'll talk about that later.
So I'm at the other end of the spectrum. So I'm Will Larson, the kids director, and we oversee everything from birth through 5th grade. Kids programming, weekend programming, midweek programming, a whole bunch of other things. So, yeah, we don't have an ish in there on ours. So we just have a birth to 5th grade, and we end firm line.
Probably the best.
I then find myself not totally in the middle, but somewhat in the middle of those two areas of oversight. My name is Stephen Boyer, and I serve on staff as the high school pastor. So also no ish involved as I focus just on the 9th through 12th graders. But one of the things that we work hard at is the transition to the young adults ministry for our seniors, and then working with the middle school ministry to integrate the new freshman class as well.
Awesome. And what do you guys love about what's going on right now in your ministries?
I can start because there's something that I have to share, and then maybe that'll prompt more conversation. But one of the things that I'm really excited about is we, being Carly, the associate director, and myself, have worked really hard at the last 18 months or so is experimenting with and implementing student leadership within our high school ministry. And especially, I'd say this spring, we've seen students just start to really capture the vision for ownership of the ministry and not just being participants, but actually involved in the ministry. And as we're continuing to dream and think about future years, we're excited to expand it to more than just upperclassmen, and also include some more intentional development opportunities for our students to not only have ownership components and coaching in that direction, but then also some more intentional spiritual direction, spiritual formation, leadership development type conversations as well of how do you grow as a follower of Jesus and more effectively use your gifts and abilities to serve him and lead others.
Great.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's Carly's been doing a great job of being kind of more of the boots on the ground piece, and I'll continue to be more and more involved with time. But it's been a really fun piece to add, and it's exciting to see how students are capturing the vision and running with it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Great. Good.
Yeah, I mean, kids ministry. One of the big shifts we kind of made over the last year was a little bit of a curriculum shift, and then just kind of a refocus on small group time, which has been a big one for me, and just seeing how our ministry continues to move through relationships. It's you guys know it's all about the relationships and the leaders and the kids, being able to experience all that God has for them and what it means to have a relationship with the Lord. All that's done through small groups, and so just I want to say it's not a new emphasis whatsoever. It's just a bigger emphasis we put this past year on small group time, and really just our model of ministry, really going from that large group, small group model. For kids, it's just kind of wrestle through, whatever they hear in large group, right? We have time of worship, we have time of teaching, and then for them to go back to their small group times and really just unpack that as a group. It's a great time for them to ask questions and to be real. Some of the stuff that's coming out of our elementary ages, for them to be able to sit with that and wrestle through it, and not just telling them, right? Telling them the answers, telling them this is how it is, this is what you should think, but just kind of sitting with that through some discussion questions. I think the thing with kids ministry sometimes is you think, oh, kids are going to be too antsy to, they need to move, they need to do something, they can't sit for too long and talk through something. Yes, to some degree, but especially those older elementary ages, it's been really fun to see them actually sit through some discussion times and wrestle through, what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and unpack the Bible stories. And so that's been a really fun shift for us. It's been one that we've tried to put a lot of time into and effort. I think we're seeing some of the fruits of it right now, which has been super fun for us.
So awesome. Yeah. Good. It's great.
I love hearing this stuff from you guys both, because as I think about like the chain effects, as you kind of like ripple up through kids to middle school to high school and then to young adults, starting to get excited about like, oh, that's right, I'm going to have students who like had a great student leadership experience coming into young adults. It's going to make my job so much easier.
You have nothing to do.
Right? Yeah, like, I won't have anything to do. It'll be great.
That's my hope.
I'll just put them in, make them a life group leader day one.
Well, honestly, that's the fun part. When you start to think like that, right? As the young adults pastors, you're thinking through what's coming up to me, right, in the next several years, even from high school or even middle school, down to kids even. That's the fun part that we get to think. And then my team and myself, we get to think about, hey, what are we passing off to middle school? So on and so on. You kind of mentioned it already. That's when you think about NextGen, right? Like that's the fun part of going, okay, yes, this is a season in kids ministry. Then once they're fifth grade going into sixth, now there's a whole adventure in middle school. Then there's high school, then young adults. And there's this continuation. And I think there's a lot of room there still too, which is exciting though.
We're all like passing off the baton.
Yeah.
I feel like in young adults where we're at now is, as we've been doing this for a few years, we're starting to see a lot of buy-in on the rhythm of young adults, which is really nice, which is our life groups weekly, YA nights monthly, which is when we gather all life groups. And now we're starting to see, like, we're past the whole, like, what's this new thing we're doing? What's this new thing we're doing? And now it's much more like, hey, when's my next YA night? When's our next mission trip? When is our next retreat? And then they're also starting all these different life groups. They've all started at different points. Right. So they're all going through different points of the life group's development. So some are so excited to be together because they finally have friends in Denver. And then some are like, man, I've been with these people for 6 months and I'm realizing they are such sinners that I don't really want to hang out with them all the time. But everybody's at these different places, but we have these touch points where we all come together. And it there's this collective hope around like, hey, wherever our life group is at in this process, like God will sustain us and do something to knit us together to help us graduate and go through life, honestly, all together. So I think watching the variety that's happening in the way that God's holding all sorts of different people's hands through young adulthood as we go has been great.
Yeah, I love this team because you guys are all, we work really hard on transitions, as you've already mentioned. And I also think about, our audience is, parents, other youth workers, probably medium, small churches. And we're blessed, I'll just say it, to have a staff team that can focus in on each one of those groups. Sometimes that's challenging, obviously, for medium, small churches that have one person who probably has 6 jobs to accomplish all this stuff, or they juggle it some other way. But we still have struggles too. So what are some of the challenges, struggles that you guys are facing? And you know what? We can be raw and real on this podcast, and because that's where everybody's living. So we might as well just go for it. But what are the challenges these days for you guys?
I got one right off the top of my head is that I think in young adult ministry, you are always saying goodbye to good people constantly. So somebody falls in love, but they lead your life group. You got to pretend to be happy for them as they move out of state, and they go get married or they go get a great job. So it's not just your serve team that you're working to connect with and like maintain and take care of. But it's also everybody within your group, because they could all choose to leave, and they frequently do choose to leave with like 0 notice. So for us, it's been really hard to just bite the bullet and celebrate transitions and say, hey, great, God is calling you somewhere. He is moving in your life. Because it's really easy to get like a scarce mindset of like, I got to keep everybody and I can't be excited for when God calls them somewhere else. But it hasn't gotten easier. It's been a thing since day one, and it hasn't stopped. So I think it will always be the toughest thing.
That's hard to lose good people.
And
That's hard. I'd say, I don't think this is unique to kids ministry in any way, but for kids ministry, there's so many opportunities, right? In the church in general. So it's not unique to kids, like I said, but there's so many good things, and it's how do we do all the good things still with excellence too? It's events, it's Discovering Jesus class for kids, it's camps, it's summer programming, it's regular weekend programming, it's child dedications, all the things that we do, right? That are great things and have some huge impact, right, on kids, on families. But it's also then the balance of not just doing those for the sake of doing them, but how do you do them with intentionality, and how do you do them with excellence, right? Yeah. I don't want to, ever put a child dedication on just for the sake of it, right? You want to have intentionality behind it, to bless those families and help celebrate with them. Different things like that. And so that can be a challenge sometimes. I think just managing the tensions of all those things. And they're all good, right? They're all good things, part of the church, part of discipling kids and families together. So I think it's always a little bit of a challenge. I think, and serve team, we've talked about serve team a little bit, and just, again, there's the balance of development and pushing and training, caring for serve team constantly, right? We have all different sizes of serve teams. Again, kids, young adults, everyone has their serve teams. And so, and just, challenge is the development side, managing that with everything else. But then there's, you're going to have people who move, who, different reasons, right? They're going to need to take a break or move to a different ministry, which is awesome. But it's then that piece of training up who's next, right? Who's next, who you're developing, who you're trying to find. It goes back to the relationships, right? We can't do small groups without some incredible leaders to invest into those kids, to show up regularly in their lives. And so that's always a challenge, right? You're always going to have people coming in and out, kind of like you said a little bit ago. But that can always be a little bit of a challenge for kids ministry.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a similar vein. It's been a really exciting year because we've had a lot of students join the high school ministry and get plugged in and get invested. So it's created a couple issues. Number one, there's a decent chunk of students who are learning how to behave within a group. So just behavior has been a frustration and a headache at times of just overall group management and setting expectations and following through those expectations. And obviously we want to create an environment where anybody could enter and hopefully interact with the love of Christ and eventually enter into a relationship with him, but also holds the group to a standard of respect and care and love for one another, as we're called to love and serve one another within the body of Christ. So that's been an issue of just learning how to coach a group, as we've had a lot of students who may or may not have been to Mission Hills before, who are invited by a friend and may or may not have much of a church background, and learning how to step into a space that's not their school and is new to them and figuring out what that looks like. And similarly, just turnover of our volunteer team or serve team is what we call it. So trying to consistently recruit and develop and train is just kind of this never ending, maybe I can say vicious cycle of constantly needing to think through, okay, who are new serve team members that we can recruit to the team, and are we actually developing the serve team that we have to be able to encounter students in a way that they need to be encountered and also meet them and address the needs that are present as well, whether that's a mental health issue or discipleship issues, just figuring out how to really develop and equip serve team for the task at hand. So there's more than one issue, Jeff.
Right.
But,
There's
just
a lot.
a few things.
There's a lot there.
Just a few things.
Yeah, when I think about the challenges, just rising up a little bit higher, you guys are in the weeds most of the time, and I get a chance to just rise up a little bit. As I just think about a couple things, obviously our overall goal is to help everyone grow with Jesus. That's what we talk about in Mission Hills, no matter what age they are. But I think about, we don't know when we're going to get them. And the odds of us having them from birth all the way through young adults is low because of transient, change jobs, move, all the things you've listed and talked about. But like we could get them in middle school on, we could get them in high school on, we could get them, little, and then they leave. And so it's like, man, how do we stay faithful with whatever spot they come into our ministries to help them grow with Jesus, no matter what's happening in all of our ministries? So there's synergy, and we're all on the same page about those things. And that goes beyond our ministries too, right? Beyond NextGen, it goes to, our lead pastor, Craig, and it goes to other ministries in the church, and how are we all on the same page, which is a big task. And I think it's a challenge to do that. Any thoughts about that? I was just thinking about that as you guys were talking, that's a couple areas where I'd say are challenges that we need to kind of try and be faithful in.
Yeah, I thought that comes to mind, and this is some of what we're trying to experiment with in terms of the student leadership program, is recognizing that somebody could step in the doors and be new to the church, new to Jesus, don't have much of a background, but then there also could be somebody who we have students graduating in just a couple of weeks who literally have been at the church their entire lives. And so how do you create multiple environments, in a sense, within the same ministry that provides opportunities for students who are new to get plugged in and learn and grow and be challenged to do so, but also at the same time hold the tension of, okay, how do we also challenge and continue to help students grow further, if you will, or deeper with Jesus, whatever word you want to use, where their love for Christ and their obedience to Christ is growing more and more over time. So that's something we've been exploring. So it's, when I teach or preach on a Wednesday, I'm trying to do so in a way that somebody who may have never opened a Bible before isn't lost, and still challenging students who have been there at the same time. So sometimes using maybe more abstract words, but then explaining it. And then in addition to that, also providing other environments for students who are desiring to go deeper to be able to do so as well. So kind of holding those things in tension, where you're thinking creatively about, okay, how, based on wherever somebody's at in their journey with Jesus, how can we both meet them where they're at, but also then challenge them to continue to take steps of faith?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like it's just the way our curriculum's set up, and something we've leaned into a little bit more this year. And the kids, kind of similar lines, at least. Again, we just don't know, when kids step into our ministry for the first time, right? New family comes to church, they have a couple kids. We have no idea their background of church, right? Their background of who God is, the Bible, anything. And so one of the things kind of on our front end of our time each Sunday with kids, and Saturdays too, is a connect time. And the connect time, sometimes it has to do with the story that day. Sometimes it ties in really well. We can ask questions that almost can prep the kids for what they're about to learn. But for the most part, it's really about relationships. Because if a kid's going to be able to connect and open up, right, and learn, engage in that group, you got to have a sense of safety. You got to have a sense of that kid's trying to figure out, can I belong here, right? Can I belong here? Do I belong here? Can I fit in with those in my circle, right? Can I fit in with these other, 10 kids in my group? I'm brand new. Again, you don't know if they have any background. So that's kind of on the front end of each of our lessons. It's really just a connect time to build relationships, right? And then everything else comes after that. Large group time, like I talked about, worship, and then small group time at the end to go deeper. But that's just been one thing. Just thinking about, kids, coming from any background that we don't know, how can they jump in pretty quickly and know that they belong and that they're safe in that environment? And so that's been something that's been cool to see, and I think there's a lot of potential.
I feel like the things that you guys are mentioning, I don't think I need to cover those again, because it's really kind of where we're at too. But in terms of the personal strategy for how to make it happen in the young adult phase of things, we do bug our fellow staff members a lot of hey, who knows this guy who's coming into young adults ministry? Hey, who knows this senior? What can you tell me about him? So we rely a lot on other departments to make the handoff really well. But then also when somebody's coming in new for the first time, that is probably the most connected they will ever feel to leadership, like church staff, is on their way in the door. Like a personal phone call, a handoff, not saying hey, go show up at that address, but hey, here's a phone number. I talked to you on the phone. I know you're a real person. I'm a real person. Here's a group of people that are going to welcome you into their home. I know it's still scary, and you might sit in your car for 30 minutes before you actually walk in, which is an amazing, common experience that I keep hearing. I'm no way, you sat in your car for how long in the parking lot? Yeah, we thought you were going to come here. But it's scarier than I think. Yeah. So I think we have a lot. It's a high touch entry into the ministry if you're new, and it's a lot of just orientation of I'm just going to tell you a bunch of information, and we'll see if you have any questions. And more often, it's well received than not. So, just almost viewing it I need an orientation to feel welcome,
right?
Kind of in this place. Yeah. So maybe it's extra, but
I love that thinking. That's good. Yeah. Okay, I'm going off script. You ready?
Ready.
So how do you balance, we do some big programming at Mission Hills, but every ministry has bigger programming, no matter what the numbers are. But how do you balance big programming with personal touch? So how do you balance a bunch of people in the room, preach, teach, big programming, games, all that stuff, whatever comes with it, with making sure, no matter what the age is here, from birth through young adults, that there's personal touch with them too. Of course, small groups comes into play, but what are your thoughts about how do you and your ministries balance those two big rocks?
Yeah, one of the things I try to do every Wednesday specifically is I trust my preparation before Wednesday night, so that way I can be present in the moment, where I work hard to study and prepare and think through illustrations and transitions and whatnot. So by the time Wednesday night rolls around, I've already spent hours getting ready for Wednesday night. Yeah. And so my hope is that by that time, when crises inevitably arise, whether it's student, serve team member, parent who drops in, some random person is in the building and we're trying to figure out who they are and if they're safe, if they're not safe, whatever might be going on, like I rely on what I've done leading up to that point. And I think there's also something to it as well of just small things. Like as students walk into the room we meet in, a lot of times I'll be at the door giving high fives to the students as they walk in, or jumping in briefly to a game of 9 Square or whatnot, where I don't want students to feel like I'm so preoccupied with getting on with the programming that I don't have time to interact with them in the moment. So it's just small gestures that I think communicate a lot. And then the other thing that I try to do is get to know students' names as best as I can. And I work really hard at getting to know students' names, so that way they come back the next week and I can call them by name. And even if it's, a couple of students, sometimes I'll play the game. So this is a tip for youth pastors, teachers, coaches, whoever, where I'll lean on another serve team member who's there, hey, do you remember their name? And that's not cheating. I think it's just being creative at problem solving. So that was like, I'm pretty sure I remember their name, but can you please confirm that for me? So that way when I do interact with them again, then I'm able to use their name instead of just, hey man, what's going on? Glad you're here. So just small things that I think ultimately make a big difference. So it's not like you have to reinvent what you do on a Wednesday or a Sunday, whatever day of the week it might be. I think it's just being intentional in small ways that communicates a lot.
Are you pretty good at 9 Square?
No, not really. I used to, a knee surgery and a shoulder surgery removed, subpar.
You can work on
that. I'm telling you what, there are a lot of good athletes that dominate 9 Square. So
we need to raise it higher for high school.
Yeah, and I don't know if I care enough to be that good at 9 Square. So, yeah.
Well, if you ever need a sub, let me know.
Yeah.
I'll help you out.
For Will. I need to raise it for Will.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I might have a little trouble there. Yeah, I think a little bit of what Boyer's saying here. I'm trying to think through kids' lens. I think there's two things I guess I would add is what you just said, but even on our serve team too, right? Taking big programming, our kids' staff, right? We can only do so much, right? It is a massive ministry. We have a lot of kids, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of serve team, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And so myself, any of my team, we cannot be everywhere at all places. And so how do you empower and equip the leaders to really take a large event, like take sports camp, for example? How do you
describe that? What's that event like?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Think of a Vacation Bible School merged with an amazing, high energy, fun sports camp, and it's just this mashup of Bible teaching, small groups, sports. Right? Kids are of all skill levels are able to maybe try something new for the first time. So we have lots of different tracks for kids to kind of dive in and engage. So this is a great summer event we do. But again, how do you take that massive high energy? It's loud. We're going to have 850 to 900 kids there this year. How do you take that big event, right? Draws a lot of people in, which is super fun. But how do you make it kind of like you're saying, balance it to feel small, feel relational? And so all that to say, even for regular weekend programming, you have to empower the leaders because they're the ones with the kids to make it small, make it relational. Again, it all goes back to small groups. So I feel like I'm talking about that all the time, but it's just a big driver. It's a big driver, right? You can take a room full of kids, but then how does it feel personal to them, right? How are they feeling seen, known, heard? Do you know their family? How can you connect with their family? All the different things. So as you grow and as you scale, you have to multiply and give things away at times, right? Again, even in my role, I can't be all places, and my team can't either. And so that's the only thing I would add to that. But yeah,
It's great.
Yeah, I'm not into what Will said in terms of empowering serve team to do it. We kind of try to. It's different in young adult ministry than in others, where I think maybe we have more leeway and permission to do so. But we view every part of our programming as developmental for those who are also running program. So not just those who would be on the receiving end of program, but for those who are running it. So when we allow our young adults in to be on the welcome team, to run a prayer activity, to lead worship and all of these things, we're debriefing with them and we're training them all the way up so that each of these places, it's programmed, but it's deeply personal in the fact that somebody's stepping into something new for the first time. So they're necessarily nervous and they're reaching out like, hey, how do I actually do this? And it creates this moment of like, man, God is moving in your life and I asked you to speak and I'm giving you a mic because I believe that he's speaking to you and I cannot wait to help you share that with your peers. So there's like every kind of piece of this is developmental, and we try to be, we're probably too deliberate, but we really feel like a big part of what makes this kind of phase of adulthood, this young adult phase, special is this sense of belonging that you can create with your chosen family. So there's a good bit that we emphasize with belonging. Like we will even have every leader show up an hour early so that we can all have dinner around a Thanksgiving looking table together before we welcome everybody else in. Just to remind ourselves, hey, the Lord has brought you in when you were a stranger, given you a place at the family table of God. And now here we will enjoy and celebrate each other. We're also going to talk about what we need to do. But like we're going to do this thing first where you feel welcomed in. Because now you got to switch, and that's now your house, and now you need to welcome other people in. So we try to make sure everything is super deliberate in the programming, which means that we can't do everything that we want to do, but it's like good in efficiency almost.
Yeah, that's that balance, right? It's a balance of like you want to do other, all the things and trying to balance that, yeah.
So how do you keep the main thing the main thing? How do you figure out what's best versus what's good? You alluded to that earlier, Will. That we could all do 1,000 things; they're all good. But how do you discern? Because we can't, But how do you discern keeping the main parts of your program, the main parts of your ministry, the main things, so that we keep the main thing the main thing?
Because
You got to look at it through a little bit of, I think, the lens of like what has the greatest impact, right? You got to think and define what is impact, what is the goal, right? What's the goal of this next year, this next 24 months even, right? Is it to reach more kids? Is it to help kids and families go deeper in their relationship? Like we got to define what that is for you, your church, your ministry, whatever that influence is that you're overseeing. And so I think just finding out what that definition is for you and your situation. Just trying to look at what's the impact, what's the risk reward, right? Yeah. But knowing there's also going to be things that are just core staples that. We're not going to get rid of child dedication. Like that's a core part for families. So and there's also great impact there, I think, as families dedicate their kids to the Lord. And so you have to balance and know there's going to be things that are going to be part of your ministry role and part of your church's rhythms. But then there's also a part of, hey, what are the extra things then, right? A sports camp. We see a lot of kids come to know what it means to have a relationship with the Lord through that camp. That's a pretty big reward. That's a pretty big investment, right, on the team and the resources that puts on that event. But the impact is massive, and so that seems like a pretty good investment of time and resources to something like that. But it's one of the extra things, right? Not one of those maybe the staples. And a lot of churches do camps and all those kinds of things. I know you guys do winter camps and summer camps, all that kind of stuff. And so, it's going to be different for every church and every leader, but.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I like to think through is I like to think as simply as I can and as strategically as I can, and then use those philosophies, if you will, to then filter through what we actually do. And so for us, we really do believe that transformation best happens in circles than in rows. And so we want to empower small group ministry as best as we can whenever we can. And so Wednesday nights, if it means cutting a game or keeping my message shorter or whatever it might be on a Wednesday to ensure that a small group has enough time, those are sacrifices I want to make every single week. Or maybe it's something along the lines of really encouraging our serve team members to take ownership of winter camp or summer camp invitations, because we believe that those experiences will really take that small group to the next level, whether it's more vulnerability or trust or just memories, group dynamics that develop through those experiences. We want to encourage that because, once again, we believe small groups are going to be the vehicle through which most of the transformation takes place. And so that in mind, by being strategic and knowing like, hey, this is what we want to focus upon, then keeping things simple allows you to then emphasize what you really want to emphasize. Right. And so I think being okay with cutting out things that you maybe really enjoy in support of your strategy or whatever you are trying to accomplish might ultimately be the thing that needs to be done, even if it's a hard decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. And obviously, it's Rick Warren and Doug Fields that kind of coined the circles and different things and the different kind of layers that we can think through, whether it's an outreach deal for an event or a weekly programming or a retreat or whatever. If that's the filter, obviously, then the gospel is presented, and you organize it a little different way than you would if it was just a worship event or if it was just a discipleship deal. I think those are helpful still. Yeah. To filter through, what's the purpose of this event, retreat, program. What's a little tricky for us, is, especially in student ministry, is you guys do the big program and small groups on the same night, Wednesdays, so there's kind of dual purposes. We've always wrestled with at Mission Hills, as long as I've been here, about that, and should those fall on the same night. Other youth ministries obviously have off-campus small groups. That's awesome, in homes or whatever it might be. Every church is different. But I think those categories, outreach, discipleship, worship, are helpful to kind of discern, what's the purpose of this thing. And I think for probably smaller, medium-sized churches listening in, or parents or staff that are part of those, you think bigger is better every time. It's not necessarily true, because we're wrestling with things like we do our big Halloween party and whether we should continue to do that. And that probably sounds so foreign to those who know what that is. And like, why wouldn't you want to continue to reach 2,000 middle schoolers? Well, because you got to weigh that. What's the benefit of that? What's the outcome? Is it just being present in the building, or are there things on the other side? Do we want to come back? Is that one of the things? So bigger is not always better. Right. Yeah. It's what's the purpose. Does that bring anything else to mind about your programming decisions, why you're doing what you're doing?
I was just going to add, I think that's the temptation of big churches too, right? There's that mindset of, is bigger always better because we're a big church? Man, you got to kind of ask yourself and wrestle through that. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to, every year the event has to be bigger and bigger and bigger. You got, like, just like you said, you got to rethink and okay, what is the purpose? What's the desired outcome, and all those kind of things. And so that's just a big church mindset you may have to fight against.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that too, because obviously big numbers of people that we reach, we are so excited about, and we'd be really excited for anything. I think almost in my head, I make the distinction between, like, do I want to reach a big number of people in a really grand, kind of fun and explosive and very public way, well, that makes me look really cool, or do I do something that nobody's going to see that's going to have a lot of impact for big people? Because like that's really the question, because big numbers of people encountering Jesus is always the goal, but is it the grand like theater way of doing it? Is that always best?
You don't always need the smoke machines.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
Some people are allergic to those.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I'm sure tech is different.
Yeah. Don't show this to tech.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You guys are great at what you do.
That's right. So let me change gears just a little bit. I want to do a couple more things before we're done on this podcast. One is for us, how are you renewing your soul? What are you doing to not burn out, not do the things? And obviously we're all in different places. I know I'm putting you on the spot. And here we are at a conference right now when this is being filmed, but podcast will come out months down the road. But like, here we are trying to refresh our souls, but we're also getting all these ideas and all these things, and it's probably stirring up some things of, boy, am I even getting that right or not? But when it comes down to it, as leaders over these ministries, what are you doing to refresh yourself, grow in your own relationship with Jesus?
I on the level of refreshing myself, I'm also kind of holding some stuff at bay, and I've learned to not just tell people I'm too busy for something, but just say, like, well, my time is limited, but I can do this. Because I would pack my schedule to the brim, but I've realized, man, I just have limits.
Right.
So I acknowledge them, and I'm like, it's not a no, but like not right now.
Right.
So I do a lot of like, yeah, just saying not like harsh no's where people feel excluded or like my time's too precious, but like, man, I'm limited. I've got this amount of time. Is that good? And then, which like I didn't arrive there by myself. I have a Christian counselor who's walked me through a lot. That's always been really helpful for me, and I totally stole that from him. So that's one of those big ones for me recently.
You're bargaining.
Yeah, that's right. I'm spreading the word.
Spreading the word.
Yeah.
Say not, I have down to a science. I think outside of that, though, you have to figure out what does refill your tank. And people I talk to, and even myself sometimes, my wife and I have this conversation, like what is the thing that refills our tank outside of the walls of church, outside of ministry? And I think you got to find out what that is for you, right? Everyone's going to have, maybe it's hobbies, maybe it's quiet time, maybe it's reading, hiking, going to the gym, running for those people, whatever that thing is. Crazy. You got to kind of name it and define it, and then there's a whole. I mean, I could go on for a while, but you got define it, schedule it, like figure that out, and what refills your tank, and make sure it happens. But I mean, yeah, my wife and I, we have some hobbies that we know that refill us, right? Again, you got to manage that with family and all that kind of stuff. But I think I guess my encouragement would be to others is find what that is, right, and then figure it out and make time for it. And so, all that to say, I don't have it figured out. It's a work in progress, but I think you need to do it as a leader of anything.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think this May will be 11 years in youth ministry, which is hard to believe that it's already been that long. And I think a couple of things that I've learned, one of kind of the anchor passages for me is in the Gospel of Luke when Jesus sends out the 72, and the 72 come back and they report, and they're basically like, Jesus, look at everything we did in your name. Look at everything that we accomplished. And I was preaching on this passage a number of years ago, and as I was studying and preparing, the phrase that came to mind for me that has really been an anchor phrase for me, and something that I share a lot of times even now in different passages as I preach, is that we're defined by whose we are, not what we accomplish. And so allowing that to be an identity forming thing, because there are highs and lows in ministry, and I think that helps ground me. So the highs aren't too high and the lows aren't too low, where I've been in ministry long enough now to know that there are going to be things that make one week really good, and other things that make that same week potentially really, really bad and really hard. And so recognizing who am I first as a follower of Christ, and then everything I then do flows out of that, I think is a huge starting point, which then gives me a lot of confidence and endurance and whatnot to weather the storms of ministry. And the other thing that I try to do is I just try to be fully present where I am. So when I'm at work, I work really hard, but then when I'm home, I do my best to be the best husband and father I can be as well, which sometimes I do a better job of that than other times, but I try not to check email or messages or get back to the things that are deemed emergencies by other people, because a lot of times those emergencies aren't truly emergencies, and just trying to be discerning of when do I need to lean in and when do I not. And in 11 years of youth ministry, there's only been just a small handful of times where it's been a true emergency of crisis at the hospital where I need to show up because parents think their child is going to die. Has happened once, and a few other situations that have come up from time to time. But for the most part, what's deemed to be an emergency really can wait until Sunday morning or Monday morning. And so being discerning of when can I lean in, but when can I also really be present and potentially delegate or push towards other resources that might be better suited to assist in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say answer my own question. I guess that's fair, right? Yeah, it would be. It is just, the struggle for those of us that are in full-time vocational ministry to not have it become our identity And that's so easy for us to slip into because, it's our calling. It's what we stay up late and get up early for and that kind of thing. Mentor of mine from years ago said a saying that sticks with me today. It's still true, is the greatest gift we'll ever give the world is our intimacy with Jesus. And that comes out in a number of different ways, right? Reading the Bible, studying the Bible, all those things, but not to do it out of duty, but to do it out of relationship. And that's a constant fight. It's a constant thing because we're preparing for stuff, right? We're giving things away. We're giving ourselves away all the time with different people. And it's so easy. And I've done all the tricks, all the things along the way of like, well, my preparation time for that talk is going to be my own personal devotional time too. All the tricks that we do, which for some people that works. But for others, it may not work quite as easily. But we got to establish rhythms and boundaries and things you alluded to already, you guys. But man, at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it's our own personal relationships with Jesus that's gonna, I don't even think the whole metaphor of the cup overflowing, because I've never had a time in my life where I was so overflowing with the abundant life of Jesus that it just leaked on everybody else. I don't know if that's ever happened, ever. But we want that, but like, how do we establish those rhythms so we're healthy, so we can pass it off to others, but also we're not this veneer where, and I continue to work on this, like we're not perfect. We don't have it all figured out, but we're trying to strive that way as other people. It's like Paul said, as I follow Jesus, follow after me kind of thing. That's what we're trying to do. You guys, the last thing I kind of want to do for our audience of parents, youth workers, pastors, teachers, administration is pray for them on this podcast and just feel prompted to do that. So why don't any of you guys want to pray? I'll close this out here and let's pray for those that are listening in on this. Maybe they're discouraged. Maybe they're feeling the weight of that. Maybe they've lost their way in the intimacy with Jesus. I don't know. But let's pray for them. Yeah. Let's go for it.
King Jesus, thank you that you invite us into this. Lord, when we do your work, I feel like you're always reminding us that it's not like you need us to do this, but you have invited us in. So you're not asking us out of an insufficiency in your plan, but out of an abundance of wisdom for knowing that this is what it means to be in your kingdom, to participate with you, to work with you, to put ourselves in places where we don't have enough, and then to watch you just move in response. So whether we are parents or youth workers and all of these, Lord, would you just make us tremendously aware of those places where we don't have enough? Would you help us rejoice in where your grace strengthens us and where your Spirit accomplishes what we cannot? And would you just lead us into more of those places? We're grateful to be here, but we don't want to stop, and we don't want to be left out of the work that you're going to do in the world. So would you just keep bringing us in?
God, I pray for more discernment for your people. Lord, would you give us that gift? Would you give us wisdom and discernment to know how to best lean in with the next generation? God, whether we're paid to do so as a teacher or an administrator or a vocational ministry leader, God, or whether we give of our time as a volunteer, as a coach, whatever role it might be, God, would you just give us discernment and wisdom by your Spirit to know how to best lean in, how to care, how to guide, how to shepherd, how to walk alongside the next generation, Lord. I think the ultimate, Lord, thing I feel burdened to pray for right now is just the opportunity to truly be present with the next generation and have the wisdom to know how to best do so. And so, God, empower us and help us to that end.
Yeah. And Father, those that might be tuning into this conversation, this podcast right now, God, who might be brand new to vocational ministry, God, those who might be brand new to working with the next generation, God, like Stephen was saying, whether it's a teacher, coach, pastor, whoever it might be, God, those that you've called to serve in NextGen ministry, God, in whatever capacity that might be, God, would you give them the eyes to see what you have in store for them, God? Would you surround them with the support, with the people in their lives to invest in them as they jump into a new chapter of their life, God? Again, whether it's a serve team member or staff member, or whatever that might be for them, God, would you open their eyes to the impact that they can have on this next generation, God? To be present with students, to love them where they're at, to meet with families, to have the hard conversations, God. Would you give them the encouragement, the wisdom, the power to jump in fully, God, and be themselves. Surround them with people to invest into them and who they are as a leader as they start on this journey, serving or working alongside the next generation, God.
Mm-hmm.
Lord, thanks so much for everybody tuning into this podcast, whether parent or administrator, teacher, coach, pastor, youth pastor, another staff role. So grateful for them, and they probably have an interest in the next generation, and it's worth it. It's worth pouring our lives into those who are coming up behind us, who might be just a little bit younger. But Lord, it's worth it, and I just pray for a great encouragement for those tuning in, that they would get to know you as close as they possibly could. We're so grateful for the gospel. We're grateful for Jesus, for you coming and giving up your life for us, so then we can in turn pass it on to other people. And so help us as we move forward. Help us to lean into you and trust you, no matter what our church looks like, no matter what our programming looks like, no matter what our parenting looks like. I pray that we would lean in with you, Jesus, and our intimacy with you would then be passed on to those around us. So thanks again for the opportunity to be able to tune in here, and thanks for those who did. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Sure.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in on this podcast, and everybody that tuned in, thank you for doing so. Be sure, if this is helpful, to subscribe, and there are resources attached to this as well, and we're so grateful that we get the opportunity to be able to talk about these things that are so important. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is hosted by me, Jeff Baxter, along with special guests who are experts in the industry. We're mixed and edited by Leopard Productions. Our senior producer is Colin McFarland. Our video director is Zach Anderson, and our digital and SEO specialist is Maddie Brower. The NextGen podcast is part of a Mission Hills podcast network here at Littleton, Colorado. Thanks for listening.